Ambassador Karen Phillips walked through the crystal halls of the Zenthari Imperial Palace, her blue diplomatic uniform crisp and formal. The walls around her glowed with a soft purple light that came from the living crystal the Zenthari used to build their structures. She had been on this alien world for 6 months now, working day and night to create a peace treaty between humanity and the Galactic Empire. The Empire controlled most of the galaxy through 17 different alien species, with the Zenthari as their military leaders. Karen knew they looked down on humans as newcomers who had only been traveling between stars for less than a century. The Empire had thousands of years of history and technology that made human achievements seem small in comparison. But Karen believed in diplomacy, and she believed in peace. She had spent 3 years of her life trying to build bridges between her people and the Empire. Her work had already prevented 2 smaller conflicts and helped establish trade routes that benefited both sides. Today was supposed to be the day she finally achieved her greatest goal. Commander Jake Morrison walked beside her, his military uniform a sharp contrast to her diplomatic clothes. He was her security chief and had been with her through every dangerous negotiation. Jake trusted Karen completely, but he never trusted the aliens they dealt with. His hand stayed close to his weapon at all times, a habit that Karen often told him to break. The negotiation room was massive, designed to make visitors feel small and unimportant. The ceiling stretched up so high that Karen could barely see. The top, giant pillars made of the same living crystal, held up the structure, and each pillar pulsed with different colors that changed based on the emotions of the Zenthari in the room. Admiral Vextar entered the chamber with the confident stride of someone who had never lost a battle. He was tall even for a Zenthari, standing nearly 8 feet high, with crystalline scales that covered his reptilian body. His scales shifted between purple and gold, colors that Karen had learned meant he felt both superior and amused by them. Situation. Behind the Admiral came a group of his military advisors, all wearing the black uniforms of the Imperial Navy. Their scales showed various shades of red and orange, indicating their aggressive mood. Karen felt a chill run down her spine, but she maintained her professional composure. Jake took his position near the wall, where he could watch all the exits. His training had taught him to always have an escape plan, and something about this meeting felt different from their previous negotiations. The Zenthari seemed more hostile than usual, and their body language suggested they had already made their decision before Karen even spoke. Karen took her seat at the negotiation table, a smooth surface made from polished stone that reflected the colored lights from the crystal walls. She opened her diplomatic case and pulled out the documents that represented months of careful work. These papers contained the framework for a lasting peace between humanity and the Empire, with detailed agreements about territory, trade, and mutual defense. Admiral Vextar did not sit down. Instead, he stood at the opposite end of the table, his scales now shifting to a more aggressive red color. When he spoke, his words came through the mechanical translation system that all Empire officials used when dealing with other species. The Admiral's voice was cold and commanding as he delivered his message. He told Karen that humanity had expanded too far into space, and that their colonies were now in territories that the Empire claimed as their own. 3 human settlements, established in what humans believed were empty star systems, were now considered illegal by Imperial law. Karen listened carefully, and then responded with the patience she had learned from years of diplomatic training. She explained that the human colonies had been established in unclaimed systems, following all the proper protocols that had been agreed upon in previous treaties. The settlements were legal according to galactic law, and the colonists had done nothing wrong. The Admiral's scales turned a deeper shade of red as Karen spoke. He dismissed her arguments with a wave of his clawed hand and declared that the Empire did not negotiate with lesser species. According to him, humans were nothing more than primitive beings who had gotten lucky with their technology. The time for talking was over. Karen felt her heart rate increase, but she kept her voice steady and professional. She reminded the Admiral that diplomacy had prevented countless wars throughout galactic history, and that peaceful solutions always worked better than violence. She offered several compromises that would allow both sides to claim victory while avoiding any loss of life. But Admiral Vextar was not interested in compromise. His scales had turned completely red now, a color that meant he was ready for violence. He told Karen that the human colonies would be evacuated within one standard galactic month, or they would be destroyed. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, and no mercy for those who refused to obey Imperial commands. Karen stood up from her chair and looked directly into the Admiral's alien eyes. She told him that she could not and would not agree to abandon innocent human families who had done nothing wrong. The colonies were legal, the colonists were peaceful, and humanity would not be bullied into giving up their rights. That was when everything changed. Admiral Vextar's patience, which had never been strong to begin with, finally snapped completely. In his mind, this human female was challenging the authority of the entire galactic empire. No lesser species had ever dared to refuse a direct order from Imperial command. The Admiral's hand moved to the plasma weapon at his side. The weapon was a standard sidearm for Imperial officers, capable of killing most organic beings with a single shot. Karen saw the movement and realized what was about to happen, but there was nowhere to run and no time to escape. Diplomat Morrison saw the danger and shouted a warning while reaching for his own weapon, but he was too far away to help. The other Zenfari in the room moved to block his path, their own weapons drawn and ready to fire. Admiral Vextar drew his plasma weapon and pointed it directly at Karen's chest. For a moment, time seemed to stop as the two beings stared at each other. Across the space that separated them, Karen, representative of a young species trying to find its place in the galaxy, and Vextar, symbol of an old empire that ruled through fear and violence. The Admiral fired his weapon without another word. The bright energy beams struck Karen in the center of her chest, and she fell backward onto the polished stone floor. Her diplomatic documents scattered around her body, pages of careful work and hope for peace now stained with the blood of their creator. Commander Morrison activated his emergency beacon with one hand while drawing his sidearm with the other. Imperial guards surrounded him immediately, but he managed to get one message through to the human fleet waiting in nearby space. His voice was clear and urgent as he spoke into his communicator, reporting that hostile action had been confirmed and that Ambassador Phillips was dead. The message would travel through hyperspace and reach Earth in 6 hours. When it arrived, it would change everything. The Galactic Empire had just made the worst mistake in their long and violent history. They had killed a human diplomat, and now they would learn what happened when humanity decided that talking was over and war was the only option left. President Lisa Carter stood in the underground Situation Room beneath the White House, her hands gripping the edge of the conference table so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The message from Commander Morrison had arrived 37 minutes ago, and every second since then had felt like an hour. The holographic display in the center of the room showed the star system where Ambassador Karen Phillips had been murdered, a red dot marking the location where everything had changed. Around the table sat the most powerful people in human space, their faces grim as they processed the news that would reshape the galaxy. General William Cross commanded the Terran Defense Force and had spent his entire career preparing for the possibility of war with the Empire. Admiral Helen Torres led the human space fleet and knew better than anyone how badly outnumbered humanity appeared to be. Director Ben Foster ran human intelligence and had been tracking Empire movements for years, waiting for exactly this moment. The president looked at each of them in turn before speaking, her voice steady despite the rage that burned in her chest. She told them that the Empire had not just killed their ambassador, but had committed an act of war against all of humanity. This was not an accident or a misunderstanding, but a deliberate choice by Admiral Vextar to murder a woman who had dedicated her life to creating peace between their species. General Cross leaned forward and activated his tactical display, showing the current military situation across human space. His report was sobering and direct. The Empire commanded over 10,000 capital ships spread across 17 different species, each one equipped with weapons and shields that had been refined over centuries of warfare. Humanity possessed exactly 412 vessels. In their official fleet, most of them designed for exploration and defense rather than aggressive warfare, Admiral Torres added her own assessment, pointing out that the Empire's numerical advantage was overwhelming by any conventional measure. Even if every human ship performed perfectly and suffered no losses, they would still be facing odds of more than 20 to 1. The Empire had been conquering other species for thousands of years, and their military machine was built for exactly this kind of conflict. But President Carter walked to the holographic display and studied the map of human space with a different perspective. She told her advisors that they were thinking like the Empire thought, focusing on numbers and conventional strategies. The aliens saw ships and weapons and assumed that superior firepower would guarantee victory. They had no understanding of what they had actually awakened by killing Karen Phillips. Director Foster activated his secure communication system and began reading reports from across human space. The free colonies of Proxima had pledged their full support within minutes of hearing the news. The Independent Mining Consortium was offering all their resources to the war effort. The Outer Rim settlements, tough frontier people who had carved homes out of hostile worlds, were demanding immediate action against the Empire. More importantly, Foster had been receiving secret communications from dissenting species within the Empire itself. The Xanthari ruled through fear and oppression, forcing other alien races to serve in their military and provide resources for their war machine. Many of these species had been watching humanity's peaceful expansion with interest, hoping that someone might eventually challenge their imperial masters. The president nodded as she listened to these reports, her expression growing more determined with each piece of information. She explained to her advisors that the Empire had made enemies of their own subjects through centuries of brutal rule. This would not be a simple war between humanity and the Xanthari, but a galactic liberation that would free dozens of oppressed species from imperial control. General Cross looked skeptical as he asked whether the president was truly suggesting total war against the entire galactic empire. The scale of such a conflict would be unprecedented in human history, requiring every resource and every life that humanity could spare. The casualties would be enormous, and the outcome was far from certain. President Carter turned to face the general directly and told him that the Empire had left them no choice. They had killed Karen Phillips because they believed humans were weak and would submit to their threats rather than fight back. The aliens were about to learn what happened when you cornered a species that valued freedom above everything else, including their own lives. The president ordered immediate activation of Protocol 7, a classified military plan that had been developed in absolute secrecy over the past 15 years. Most of the people in the room had never heard of Protocol 7 because it represented humanity's most carefully guarded secret. While the Empire believed they were facing a minor species with limited military capacity, they were actually about to confront an enemy that had been preparing for this exact scenario since first contact. Within hours of the president's order, hidden facilities across human space began to activate. On the far side of Earth's moon, inside what appeared to be a standard mining operation. Massive blast doors opened to reveal shipyards that had been building vessels in complete secrecy. Similar facilities hidden in asteroid belts, on the moons of gas giants, and in remote star systems began producing ships and weapons at an incredible rate. Admiral Kevin Parker received his activation orders while commanding what everyone believed was a small patrol squadron near the edge of human space. His ships looked like standard exploration vessels, but they were actually command ships for the hidden fleets that had been waiting for this moment. Within 6 hours, Parker's tiny squadron had grown into a massive battle fleet that appeared. Seemingly from nowhere, the Empire's intelligence network had completely failed to detect humanity's true military capacity. While they had been watching the official human space fleet and counting its modest number of ships, the real war machine had been hidden right under their noses. Humanity had learned from studying other species that had challenged the Empire and failed, and they had spent years preparing a different kind of response. Dr. Amanda Lewis emerged from her secret laboratory on Mars, carrying data that would change the nature of galactic warfare. Her research team had been studying captured Empire technology for over a decade, reverse engineering their weapons and shields while developing improvements that the aliens had never imagined. Human ships would not just match Empire technology, but surpass it in ways that would shock their enemies. The most important advantage was not in weapons or shields, but in the computer systems that controlled them. Human artificial intelligence had developed adaptive learning programs that could analyze enemy tactics during battle and automatically adjust their own strategies to counter them. Every engagement would make human forces stronger, while the Empire continued using the same predictable methods they had relied on for centuries. President Carter addressed the nation and all human colonies in a broadcast that would be remembered for generations. She told them that Ambassador Corinne Phillips had died trying to build peace with an enemy that only understood violence. Now humanity would speak in the language the Empire preferred, and they would deliver their message with overwhelming force. Galaxy was about to discover that humans did not just fight wars, but ended them completely. The Empire had killed one diplomat and awakened an entire species to the reality that some enemies could only be defeated through total victory. Captain Tony Mitchell stood on the bridge of the HSV Defiance when the encrypted message arrived from Earth Command. He had been patrolling the border systems for 3 months, keeping watch for Empire ship movements while maintaining the appearance of routine security operations. The message was short and direct, containing only the words that every human military officer had memorized, but hoped never to hear. Execute Protocol 7. All human vessels are now authorized for unrestricted warfare. The gloves are off. Tony had served in the Terran Defense Force for 15 years and had participated in dozens of military operations. But he had never seen authorization for Protocol 7. As he read the classified orders that followed, his understanding of humanity's true military capacity changed completely. The official fleet that everyone knew about was only a tiny fraction of what humanity had actually built over the past decade and a half. Across human space, hidden installations began revealing their true purpose. On Luna, what appeared to be standard mining facilities suddenly opened massive doors to expose shipyards that had been operating in complete secrecy. The workers who everyone believed were extracting minerals and ice had actually been building warships designed specifically to fight the Galactic Empire. Similar transformations occurred throughout the solar system and beyond. Asteroid mining stations revealed themselves as weapons manufacturing plants. Research facilities on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn opened their hidden sections to show fleets of completed vessels waiting for their activation orders. Even some of the remote colonies that seemed focused on agriculture and terraforming had been secretly contributing to humanity's war preparations. Admiral Kevin Parker received his orders while commanding what everyone believed was a small exploration squadron near the edge of human territory. His 3 ships looked like standard science vessels, equipped with sensors and laboratories for studying distant star systems. But when Parker entered his command codes, the vessels transformed before his eyes. Hidden weapon ports opened along their hulls, revealing plasma cannons and missile launchers that had been concealed behind false panels. Shield generators that were far more powerful than anything in the official fleet came online, creating protective barriers that could withstand direct hits from Empire weapons. Most importantly, the ship's computer systems activated programs that had been waiting dormant for years. The HSS Retribution emerged from its hiding place inside Asteroid Station Delta 7, a facility that had been disguised as a simple refining operation for over a decade. The massive dreadnought was twice the size of anything in the official human space fleet, with armor plating that incorporated alien materials humanity had acquired through secret trading operations. Its crew of 3,000 included volunteers from every human colony, all of whom had trained for this moment while maintaining cover identities as miners, farmers, and researchers. Commander Julie Anderson served as the ship's tactical officer and had spent 5 years learning every detail of Empire military doctrine. She knew their standard formations, their preferred battle tactics, and the weaknesses in their defensive systems that human intelligence had identified through careful observation. More importantly, she understood how to use humanity's technological advances to exploit those weaknesses. Admiral Parker stood on the Retribution's bridge and watched as his hidden fleet assembled around him. 1,600 capital ships appeared. From their concealment, each one equipped with weapons and systems that surpassed Empire technology. But the real advantage was not in individual ship capabilities, but in the network that connected them all together. Dr. Amanda Lewis had spent 10 years developing the systems that would give humanity its greatest advantage in the coming war. From her laboratory on Mars, she monitored the activation of adaptive artificial intelligence programs that would revolutionize space combat. These systems could analyze enemy behavior in real time, learning from every engagement and automatically adjusting human tactics to counter whatever strategies the Empire employed. The doctor's research team had reverse-engineered every piece of Empire technology they could acquire through diplomatic channels, trade agreements, and covert operations. They had improved upon alien designs in ways that their original creators had never imagined, creating weapons that were more efficient and shields that were more resilient than anything the Empire possessed. But the most significant breakthrough was in the realm of battlefield intelligence. Human ships could share information instantly across vast distances, creating a collective awareness that allowed individual vessels to respond to threats they had not even detected themselves. When one ship learned something new about enemy capabilities, every other ship in the fleet gained that knowledge immediately. Captain Rick Johnson commanded the first wave of human ships that would engage the Empire fleet. His force of 200 vessels looked modest compared to the thousands of ships that Admiral Vextar had assembled. But Johnson knew that appearances could be deceiving. His ships carried weapons that could penetrate Empire shields and armor, that could withstand their return fire. More importantly, Johnson's fleet was only the visible portion of humanity's response. Admiral Patricia Hayes waited with 800 additional ships hidden in the sensor shadow of the system's gas giant, while Admiral Danny Wright had positioned his stealth fleet among the asteroids where Empire sensors could not detect them. The aliens believed they were facing a desperate attack by an inferior enemy, but they were actually walking into a carefully planned trap. The human fleets had been practicing these coordinated tactics for years, using remote star systems where Empire observers could not monitor their activities. Every captain knew their role in the larger strategy, and every crew member understood that the success of their mission depended on perfect timing and flawless execution. human intelligence had also been working to undermine Empire unity from within. Secret communications had been established with oppressed species who served in the Imperial military against their will. Many of these aliens were ready to switch sides if humanity could demonstrate that the Empire could be defeated, turning the conflict from a war of conquest into a liberation movement. The psychological impact of revealing humanity's true military strength would be almost as important as the physical damage their ships could inflict. The Empire had ruled through fear and intimidation for centuries, convincing subject species that resistance was hopeless. When human forces demonstrated that the Imperial military could be defeated, it would inspire rebellions across dozens of star systems. Admiral Parker opened a secure channel to all human forces and delivered the message that would begin humanity's response to Ambassador Phillips' murder. He told them that the Empire had made the mistake of believing that humans were weak and would submit to threats rather than fight for their principles. Today they would learn that some species could not be intimidated, conquered, or destroyed by conventional means. The war machine that humanity had built in secret was about to reveal itself to a galaxy that had never seen anything like it. Admiral Vexstar stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Imperial Devastator, watching the tactical display with complete confidence. His fleet of 3,000 ships had assembled in the Kepler 442 system, the same location where Ambassador Karen Phillips had been killed just 2 weeks ago. Intelligence reports from Empire spies suggested that humanity possessed fewer than 500 vessels total, making this battle a simple matter of overwhelming force. The Admiral's scales shifted to an amused gold color as he reviewed the human response. Long-range sensors detected approximately 200 ships approaching his position, a pathetically small force that would be destroyed within hours. Vexstar had brought enough firepower to eliminate every human colony in known space, and he intended to use it all to send a message that would prevent other species from challenging Empire authority. His tactical officer reported that the human ships were maintaining standard formation and approaching at normal speed, showing no signs of advanced tactics or unusual technology. The vessels appeared to be standard exploration and defense craft, exactly what Empire intelligence had predicted. Vexstar ordered his fleet to prepare for battle, confident that this would be the shortest war in galactic history. What the Admiral did not know was that Captain Rick Johnson's strike force was only the first wave of humanity's response. Hidden in the sensor shadow of the system's massive gas giant, Admiral Patricia Hayes waited with 800 additional vessels that had been equipped with the most advanced stealth technology humanity could produce. Their ships were invisible to Empire sensors and would remain so until they chose to reveal themselves. Even more dangerous was Admiral Danny Wright's stealth fleet, which had used experimental cloaking devices to position themselves throughout the asteroid belt that surrounded the system. Wright's ships had been infiltrating the area for 3 days, moving slowly and carefully to avoid detection while they took up positions that would allow them to strike at the Empire fleet from multiple directions simultaneously. The Battle of Off, Kepler 442, began when Captain Johnson's fleet came within weapons range of the Empire's forward positions. The human ships opened fire immediately, their new plasma cannons tearing through Imperial shields with an efficiency that shocked the alien commanders. The Empire vessels returned fire with their own weapons, but their energy beams struck human shield barriers that absorbed the damage without failing. Admiral Vexstar watched his tactical display with growing confusion as human ships proved far more resilient than expected. Empire weapons that should have destroyed the enemy vessels in single hits were requiring multiple strikes to achieve any damage. Meanwhile, human fire was penetrating Imperial defenses and causing significant casualties among his forward squadrons. Admiral's scales shifted from gold to orange as he realized that Empire intelligence had been completely wrong about human military capabilities. These were not the primitive ships his spies had reported, but advanced warships that incorporated technology superior to anything the Empire possessed. Vexstar ordered his reserve squadrons to engage, intending to overwhelm the humans through sheer numbers. That was when Admiral Hayes emerged from the gas giant's sensor shadow with her hidden fleet. 800 human warships appeared on the Empire's tactical displays without warning, their weapons already charged and ready to fire. The Imperial fleet found itself caught in a perfect pincer movement, with enemy forces attacking from two directions while their own ships were still trying to adapt to the unexpected situation. Hayes had positioned her fleet to maximize the chaos and confusion among Empire ranks. Her ships appeared directly behind the Imperial formation, forcing Vexstar's vessels to turn and divide their firepower between two separate threats. The human admiral had studied Empire tactics for years and knew exactly how to exploit their rigid command structure and predictable responses. But the real surprise came when Admiral Wright's stealth fleet revealed itself from within the asteroid belt. Human ships that had been invisible to all sensors suddenly appeared throughout the Empire formation, having used their cloaking technology to position themselves for point-blank attacks on the most important Imperial vessels. Wright's captains opened fire on command ships, supply vessels, and communication arrays, targeting the infrastructure that held the enemy fleet together. Admiral Vexstar felt panic rising in his chest as his tactical display showed human ships appearing from everywhere at once. His own flagship came under direct attack from 3 different directions, with enemy vessels that had somehow penetrated his defensive formations without being detected. The Imperial Devastator's shields failed under the concentrated fire, and damage reports began flooding in from across the ship. The Admiral's scales turned black with fear as he realized that everything the Empire believed about humanity had been completely wrong. These were not primitive newcomers with limited ships and outdated weapons, but a military power that had been hiding their true strength while carefully studying Empire weaknesses. The humans had planned this battle down to the smallest detail, using superior technology and innovative tactics to turn what should have been an easy victory into a devastating defeat. Human ships fought with a coordination that the Empire had never encountered before. Individual vessels seemed to know what their allies were doing without any visible communication, responding to threats and opportunities as if they shared a single mind. When one human ship identified a weakness in an Imperial vessel, every nearby friendly unit immediately exploited that same vulnerability. The battle lasted 6 hours, but the outcome was decided within the first 30 minutes. Empire ships that had dominated galactic warfare for centuries found themselves outgunned, outmaneuvered, and completely overwhelmed by an enemy they had dismissed as insignificant. Human weapons proved superior to Imperial technology. Human shields withstood attacks that should have been devastating, and human tactics exposed every flaw in Empire military doctrine. Admiral Vexstar's fleet suffered catastrophic losses as human forces systematically destroyed Imperial vessels with ruthless efficiency. The Admiral himself watched helplessly as ship after ship under his command was reduced to burning wreckage, their crews dead or dying in the vacuum of space. His communication systems failed, his supply lines were cut, and his command structure collapsed under the relentless human assault. When the fighting finally ended, over 2/3 of the Empire fleet had been destroyed or disabled. Human casualties were less than 8%, a ratio so favorable that it seemed impossible to the surviving Imperial commanders. The mighty Galactic Empire had suffered the worst military defeat in their recorded history, and it had been inflicted by a species they considered barely worthy of notice. But Admiral Vexstar's nightmare was not over. As the remnants of his fleet attempted to retreat from the battle zone, Admiral Parker's Fifth Fleet emerged from hyperspace directly in their path. Fresh human warships blocked every escape route, trapping the surviving Imperial vessels in a system where they had expected easy victory, but found only death and destruction. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, reaching every ship in the system and every monitoring station throughout Empire space. Admiral Parker identified himself and offered the Imperial survivors a simple choice between surrender and complete annihilation. The time for Empire arrogance had ended, and the age of human dominance was beginning. President Lisa Carter walked through the enormous halls of the former Imperial Palace on SciFiPrime, her footsteps echoing off the crystal walls that had once intimidated visitors from across the galaxy. 6 months had passed since Ambassador Karen Phillips was murdered in these very corridors, and now the woman who had ordered humanity's response stood in the heart of what used to be the most powerful empire in known space. The war had been swift and decisive beyond anyone's expectations. Human forces had systematically dismantled the Empire's military infrastructure across 17 star systems, using superior technology and adaptive tactics to achieve victory after victory. But more importantly, they had liberated oppressed species throughout Imperial territory, turning the Empire's own subjects into allies who fought alongside their human liberators. The massive council chamber had been redesigned to accommodate representatives from 43 different species, many of whom had lived under Imperial rule for centuries. The intimidating architecture remained the same, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Where once only Imperial nobles could speak, now delegates from formerly enslaved worlds participated as equals in decisions that would shape the future of the galaxy. General Nathan Cook stood at attention as he delivered his final military report to the assembled delegates. As the newly appointed military governor of the former Imperial territories, he had overseen the complete destruction of the Empire's war machine. Every Imperial fleet had been destroyed or captured. Their leadership was in custody awaiting trial for war crimes, and their military installations had been either dismantled or converted to peaceful purposes. The general's report included casualty figures that shocked even the human leadership. The Empire had lost over 90% of their military forces, while human casualties remained under 15% across all engagements. The technological advantage had been so overwhelming that most battles ended within hours, with Imperial forces surrendering rather than facing complete annihilation. Admiral Sharon Garcia had commanded the final assault on the Imperial capital, leading a fleet of 2,000 human ships against the last stronghold of Xanthari power. The battle for SciFiPrime had lasted only 4 hours, with the planet's orbital defenses proving completely ineffective against human weapons and tactics. The surrender of the Imperial homeworld marked the official end of an empire that had dominated the galaxy for over 3,000 years. But the most significant outcome of the war was not military, but political. 14 species that had been forced to serve the Empire under threat of destruction requested formal alliance with humanity. 3 others declared independence and asked for human protection while they established their own governments. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted completely, with humanity emerging as the dominant force in galactic politics. President Carter addressed the council chamber, speaking to representatives of species that had dreamed of freedom for generations. She told them that Ambassador Karen Phillips had believed in the power of diplomacy and peaceful cooperation between different worlds. The ambassador had died because the Empire refused to accept that other species deserved respect and the right to determine their own futures. The president explained that humanity had not fought this war for conquest or revenge, but to ensure that no diplomat would ever again be murdered for trying to build peace. The human response had been overwhelming because the alternative was to allow bullies and tyrants to rule the galaxy through fear and violence. Humanity had chosen to fight. so that others could live in freedom. Dr. Rachel Moore stepped forward to address the council as humanity's new chief diplomatic officer. She had served as Ambassador Phillips' deputy and had been promoted to replace her fallen colleague. Moore announced that the Human Federation offered alliance to any species committed to peace and mutual respect, protection to any species threatened by oppression, and a promise that diplomacy would always be backed by the strength necessary to defend it. The transformation of galactic politics was visible in the council chamber itself. Former Imperial Admiral Zexanar, who had replaced the disgraced Vextar as military leader of the Zenthari, sat among the delegates with his scales displaying the deep blue of acknowledgement and submission. He had surrendered his remaining forces rather than see his species completely destroyed, choosing survival over the pride that had led to their downfall. Representatives from the Corphic Mining Consortium spoke about the liberation of their labor camps, where imperial overseers had forced their people to extract resources for the war machine. The Valdris Agricultural Collective described how human forces had freed their farming worlds from imperial taxation that had kept their population near starvation for decades. Species after species told similar stories of oppression ended and freedom restored. President Carter concluded her address by looking directly into the cameras that were broadcasting her words across the galaxy. She spoke to any potential threats that might be watching, reminding them of what had happened to the last group that chose violence over diplomacy. The message was clear and unmistakable. Humanity would protect the innocent and defend the peaceful, regardless of the cost or the odds. The age of the Galactic Empire was over, and the age of the Human Federation had begun. Across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for millennia could finally sleep peacefully, knowing that humanity stood watch against those who would threaten the innocent. The lesson learned from the Empire's fall would not be forgotten. Never underestimate what humans will do to protect their own and defend justice. 1 year later, a memorial was erected on Earth in honor of Ambassador Karen Phillips and all those who had died fighting for freedom. The inscription was simple but powerful, reading that her death had awakened humanity's strength, while her memory continued to guide their compassion. Visitors from dozens of worlds came to pay their respects to the woman whose murder had changed the course of galactic history. The galaxy was indeed a different place now, one where diplomacy was respected because it was backed by the knowledge that some species would go to any length to protect peace and justice. The Human Federation had proven that military might, combined with moral purpose, could overcome any enemy, no matter how powerful or established they might appear. And if anyone in the known universe was asked what lessened the fall of the Galactic Empire taught them, the answer was always the same. Never threaten a human diplomat, because humanity remembers everything and forgives nothing when it comes to protecting those who work for peace. The Empire had learned this lesson in blood and fire, and their fate served as a warning that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come.